Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay. Welcome to episode 175. I'm speaking with Noëlle Triaureau. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Allan McKay podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on allanmckay.com.
Have you ever sent in your reel wondering why you didn't get the call back? Or what was the reason you didn't get the job? Here's the thing, most of us think you just put your latest work on your reel to some cool music and send it off, and then you get the job. A lot of us aren't aware that the majority of the reels sent to studios are skipped through and sometimes never even watched in the first place. The fact is, everything we were taught about landing a job as an artist is wrong. Over the past 20 years working for studios like Industrial Light and Magic, Ubisoft, Blur Studio, I built hundreds of teams, hired thousands of artists, and reviewed tens of thousands of reels. That's why I decided to write a book from the perspective of somebody that actually does the hiring. Learn the exact formula to captivate and qualify you as the obvious artist for the job, how to build a reel that ranks high on YouTube and attracts studios to you. The best part is with this book, you can get it right now absolutely free. Whether you're in design, games, TV, or film, go over to allanmckay.com/myreel. All right, welcome to a brand new year. So as this episode goes live, it is January 1st, 2019, and we're starting a brand new year. So I hope last year was a big success, and more importantly, I hope that you are able to set yourself up for an even bigger year this time around. So I'm really excited for this year and everything that we've got in store. I've got lots of really cool surprises and other things coming up, but in the meantime, I want to get right into this episode. So this episode is with Noëlle Triaureau. And again, I apologize, I'm Australian. I cannot help but butcher people's names occasionally, but Noëlle is really inspiring. I think this episode in general is going to be a really amazing episode. Noëlle's background is as a production designer and an art director, doing a lot of look dev and conceptual work for Sony and on many other productions. She's worked on everything from Smurfs movie, Surf's Up, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Hotel Transylvania, and so many others. So, as I said, I want to get right into this episode. I think this will be a really insightful one to dive into Noëlle's career history and insights that she shares, as well as looking at someone who's gone specifically to one studio and built her way up very aggressively, applying a lot of her business background as well into her art career. Obviously, Noëlle is an amazing artist, and a lot of the information and knowledge that she shares in this episode is really inspirational. So I'm really excited for this episode. That being said, if you want to check out the show notes, go to allanmckay.com/175, so the number 175, and you'll be able to get all the notes, quotes, key insights shared, and everything else for this episode and more. Finally, I'm going to be sharing a lot of really heavy-duty, free, high-end, high-value content in the form of videos, masterclasses, live calls and webinars, books, visual effects training and tutorials, and so much more. This year is going to be epic. So if you want to get on my free Inner Circle email list, go to allanmckay.com/inside. 90% of all the work and all the free content, over 100 hours typically put out every single year, is all on there. I want to reward those who take action. So this is your chance to sign up. It's free. Go to allanmckay.com/inside. Okay, so that being said, let's dive in. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
My name is Noëlle Triaureau. I'm a visual development artist in the animation industry.
Cool, that's awesome. And I'm originally from Australia, so I'm glad you said your last name, not me, because I would have butchered it. Cool, and just to start out, I figured I'd ask, did you always want to be an artist growing up, or is it something that you fell into later on?
I think ever since I was a child, I've always enjoyed drawing, doodling. I've always appreciated beautiful, colorful images, and I think it's always been a medium just to express myself. So it's always been there in the background. when I was a little child, I wanted to be actually a veterinarian. I don't
Cool.
think it was obvious to me that I would become an artist. And then growing up in France, I felt as though I needed job security as I would
Hmm.
go on. I didn't have any artists in my family, so I not not any role model I could relate to, and it wasn't obvious for me as a woman in France how to make a career and be self-sustainable financially. So I've decided early on to just study something a bit safer and more obvious, I suppose. And grew and did. I studied business. I got a business degree.
That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting because you're right. Like, I've met so many people who do have that kind of balance where on one side you're passionate about something, but you're also looking for something that at least around your other peers, in other words, like your parents or people around you, like you want a legitimate career. Almost doing air quotes. And most people don't really understand that you can have a career in this other area. Especially, like I think in the last 10 years, it's kind of become a bit more mainstream. But yeah, so I mean, in the beginning, did you always feel like you were kind of torn between those about one being something that is a sustainable career and the other thing maybe kind of nagging at you that you want to be an artist?
Absolutely, because well, I think hindsight is 2020, but as a student, when you're looking around yourself and you're trying to figure out what does it mean to specialize in a field, there's a lot of anxiety and worry. Well, first, are you going to be successful at that? And also, are you going to be happy and satisfied and grow?
Mm,
I think obviously things have evolved a lot where you don't need to, whatever you start off at the beginning of your career is not necessarily the same field as you're going to be in at the end of your career. People have evolved and they shift and they do actually lateral moves also, and they don't always stay in the same kind of obvious trajectory. So these are things that I've been learning as I went along. But when you're first starting and deciding what are you going to major in, it's a really important decision. And the more information you can get about different fields, different jobs, the better informed will be your decision. And yeah, there's a lot that revolves around that. You really feel as though you're committing yourself for the rest of your life. And
mm.
thankfully, things are changing a lot nowadays with our generations.
No, that's cool. That's so cool. And yeah, you're right. I do think that a lot of people, if they aren't doing what they're passionate about, if they're not getting that fulfillment in their day job, then they end up, working late nights and doing all this to kind of get that fulfillment outside of it. And I think that's always a good, clear indicator that you're not in the right career path if you're having to escape to it, every day.
Well, and also there's geography. I mean, I spent many years in France and in not too far from Paris, but it was still smaller towns, and there wasn't that many outlets of where you could see successful artists who were financially secure. Obviously, there are jobs in Paris, and there are more jobs in Los Angeles, especially in the animation field. But geography has a lot to do with how you're going to be able to find a job and where you're going to be able to live. So once again, on that level too, things are evolving where more people can work remotely nowadays. So
Mm.
that opens up so many more opportunities on one hand, but of course more competition on the other hand. So if you want to be able to have a job, you're going to have to be at the top of your game on that level too.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really cool. And there's actually one thing I was curious about, like you obviously having a background in business, like do you think that maybe indirectly that's something that you've benefited from down the line with your career?
I do think so. I think it's an immense benefit because I can see things from different perspectives, obviously. I mean, at several levels. On my own personal level, how to promote myself, how to negotiate at a job interview, and many other things like that. But also on a studio's point of view, what they're looking for in an artist, but also what they're looking for in a project, in a movie, and basically their R&D, what they want to invest in and how they want to grow. There's a lot of overlap between, my business studies and how I see the studios evolve and what their needs are. So it's really fascinating to have had a chance to study that more in depth.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful thing. I think I really wish that artists did kind of embrace the business a lot more, because a lot of us tend to be allergic to the concept of business. Like we're like, I'm an artist, I don't need to do all that. But at the same time, like I think that if you're able to be even a producer and an artist, you're right. You see it from two different perspectives, and it helps, I think, have a bit more scope on the bigger picture. So yeah, I think that's really amazing.
Well, it's actually very interesting. Like just when you're making a movie, and you're obviously every movie is always a big teamwork. Nobody can make a movie by himself. It's
Hmm.
just so much work. It's extremely involved, and people are asked to specialize in different fields and to use their brains differently and think and push the envelope very differently. But it's paramount for the different teams to understand that we're all in the same boat. We want the best looking movie for what we can afford. And that's thinking within the box. Unfortunately, you want to bring in ideas that are outside the box, but you want to execute a movie that is within the budget. And so there's those two main ends of the spectrum, and you're going to be swaying back and forth to try to, make the best looking movie you can with what you have at hand. And it's important for artists to understand that. It's like oftentimes when you come out of art schools, you have those great big ideas that you're going to make a revolution, and you're going
Hmm.
to push the envelope so far, and you're going to make a movie that nobody has seen before and things like that. And then you realize, well, there are technical issues, there's financial issues, there are many reasons why and of course, marketing and what is the public going to be able to accept or not. You don't want to go so far left field and that you lose your audience too. So there's a lot of other things to bear in mind. And I know a lot of artists can reason obviously around that and understand that, but some are very, very passionate to the point where they do not want to compromise. And then in that case, maybe animation is not the best field for them. And or if so, it's going to be more of an artistic for focusing on shorts. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They're absolutely fantastic too. But what I'm saying, I'm talking about more mainstream feature animation, where you're talking, about larger budgets and a lot of people helping out on those shows.
That's right. You're providing a service, and you're right. I think there's a lot of people who, especially earlier in their career, they go on expecting that it's kind of their short film, instead of realizing like they're being hired to perform one task of thousands, and you're all going to fit inside of that machine.
It's on many levels. It's always a challenge, because as an artist, you're thinking of, you want to push the look as impeccable, as beautiful in every single shot as possible. And of course, there's going to have to be some trade-offs. There's going to be going to have at some points to be some hard decisions because of the financial aspects, but also about, for example, marketing. Marketing has a very clear knowledge of what's going to sell the movie best and what the audience is looking for. And that can be very frustrating, because oftentimes as artists, we feel as though stories have already been told that way, and why play it safe? Don't you want to tell
Mm.
something fresh and different? And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes between both sides, because yes, marketing is happy to take a little bit of risk and do something a little different, a little fresh, but not to jump, 2 feet into a complete untold realm and invest millions and millions of dollars in something that is just too much. Anybody would want to do that with their money. So it's like, why expect it out of a big studio?
That's right. Yeah, I think one of the most dangerous things if you're ever pitching a project is to say, this is totally original. No one's ever done it before. This is going to be amazing. It's just like, all right, like that says it's completely unproven and a total risk. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, I was just curious, like with your career, obviously a massive portion of that's been at Sony. Like, how did you get started, going from business school to, again, I'm assuming in France, or was that in England?
Well, the business school was a European program, so I spent 2 years in London and 2 years in France. So it was a 4-year program. And after that, I worked a little bit in France, and I came to Los Angeles, and I started working actually at the business school in UCLA.
Hmm.
And when I was here, geography, once again, things have changed quite a lot here. When I came here from France, I in LA, I've actually met a bunch of artists who were making really a good living out of doing things they loved. And all of a sudden I started having role models around me of saying, oh, well, that sounds fantastic. You can actually make a good living, painting, drawing, designing, doing all those amazing things. So I started taking a lot of night classes over the weekends on top of my full-time job. And little by little, I decided, okay, I'm working like 45, 50 hours a week, and then I'm doing at least as much as that, drawing and painting. So I'm not sleeping. So I got to make a decision. And so I actually went back to study. And at that point, I went back to France for a 4-year degree in art in Paris. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot of back and forth, I suppose.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so from there, how did you initially approach Sony? Like, how did that come to be?
Well, through the studies I did in art when I was in Los Angeles and the network of people, of artists and friends that I made while I was here, I befriended some artists who eventually worked at Sony, and I had a great opportunity when I came back out from art school to show my portfolio to an artist I really look up to. His name is Paul Lesane, who's an incredibly talented production designer. And at that time, he was working at Sony, and he had me visit the studios, and he actually decided to give me a chance on one of his shows. So it's like everything started from there. It was back on Surf's Up, so it was quite a while ago now.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's funny. I know so many people from France who are all working in LA. It just seems like there's like the French connection is pretty strong in LA when it comes to artists. Even at Sony, there's a few guys who are animators over there. But that's so cool. And yeah, I mean, for you again, like I've only kind of gotten the 30,000-foot view of your career, but what was really intriguing is obviously you have kind of had a very fast turnaround where you've managed to make a lot of strides in the time that you had like working at Sony and moving all the way through. So I'm just curious, like with Surf's Up, like what was that experience like working on that project? Was that your first ever feature film?
That was my first feature film, and it was a tremendous experience. At that time, Sony was just starting in the animation, and they had this huge know-how. I mean, it's such an amazing studio where you have a lot of people who can do brilliantly what they specialized in. And to see Sony embrace the animation industry was really exciting. And they started off with Open Season and with Surf's Up. So it was just the second one lined up. They did also short, I think it was Chub Chub, which was also very fun. And it was really exciting also to see Sony wanting to do every animation movie be visually very different one from another. They were not trying to have a very obvious, clear look of movie for every movie that they make. They were kind of embracing the opposite, to be very creative and different from one film to the next. And that's also very stimulating as an artist to see that happen.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. You're right. Like when you don't feel like you've seen like every single one of their films when because they're all the same kind of style and theme. But no, that's so cool. And I guess like what were some of the big challenges going into Surf's Up? Because again, I find it really interesting transitioning into feature film. It's always a bit of a different realm. But on top of that, like Sony, I used to have a lot of friends around 2005, 2006 there, and at the time was a pretty large crowd of people. So I mean, going to such a bigger infrastructure, like a bigger, team, rather than, let's say, doing commercials with 20 people or something like that. What was it like going into that environment?
Well, of course, I mean, for me, it was very intimidating because it was really my first job in feature animation. But the people I've been working with, they were all very, very supportive and welcoming and open to helping out and kind of mentoring on the go and things. So I've learned a lot on the fly, and also just the way the studio worked. It found its feet of how to work also in animation, because there's this huge know-how to do special effects and live action, and everything looks absolutely amazing. And then of course they some of them were very excited to learn and embrace how to adapt things to animation, and it was really there was a lot of synergy and scope for creative exploration. I know that, for example, simple example on Surf's Up was that the look of the film was kind of like a documentary,
Mm.
mockumentary of penguins surfing as a competition. And so first we started looking at some of those movies like Spinal Tap and other movies where it's kind of a documentary and it's fun and okay, so how do they place the camera? How are they going to film things? And there's like sometimes some bumps in the cameras and things like that. And so they've been testing with cameras and 3D how to kind of emulate or simulate basically that kind of motion and to just make it feel real and fresh. And that was really fun to see the team explore that, for example.
Oh, that's so cool.
Another thing to wrap our brain on, and when there was some back and forth between the art department and the visual effects team of how to create the look of the waves to make them
Yeah.
so believable and have the penguins surf around them and interact with them. It was like really amazing the job that they've been, how they've been programming the waves and thinking about them. So it's like, it's been fascinating at all levels to see everybody bring their own area of expertise and work together.
Yeah, no, I love it. And yeah, I love the approach for the waves just because again, it was more kind of a combination of rigging and effects rather than like trying to overcomplicate everything with simulations for every shot or something that would probably be the death of any production. That's awesome. And what about, I'm just curious about Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs because again, I thought it was such an amazing film and a fun one to watch.
Yeah, Cloudy, once again, visually very different from the other movies that had been done so far, and very cartoony, very wacky, all the way to just the way the characters were animated and rigged. It was a little bit like the Muppet Show in some ways, and it was also, just like really playful animation, and that was really fun to see that develop too. And when you look at the original franchise, the books themselves, the children's book, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the original artwork is very, very different. So I'm really glad that the directors, the production designer, they all decided to take it to more of a SASEC look, basically, and explore that was just so appropriate for a very wacky kind of a story.
That's great. And for that role, you moved from, let's say, Surf's Up was more matte painting to actually doing viz dev on that. Is that right?
Actually, I first started on Surf's Up in the viz dev department. I was
Okay.
doing color, and then when it went into production, I rolled over into the production side and helped out with the matte painting. And after that, I came back to Cloudy with a Chance to Meatball for VizDev. So in VizDev, I was at first most focused on color. And then when I started working on Hotel Transylvania, then I started working both doing, my own drawings and layout and following the style. We were going with, once again, something very different. We were going for more of a graphic look. And so I was doing, drawing and painting for whatever we wanted to develop, whatever locations.
That's so cool. And so currently, like Smurfs: The Lost Village, is that the latest project that you've been working on? Obviously, that's out.
It's the latest one that I've been working on that is out. Some other projects since then, either they're not ready yet or some don't get greenlit. It's always that's working behind the curtains, you realize there's a lot of projects that actually never get to see the day for one reason or another, and that's just the nature of the thing. It's a little bit frustrating when you think of all those cool potential projects, but on the other hand, there has to be some hard decisions because, well, there's only a limited amount of resources.
Yeah, no, it's going to be tricky. I remember I was having lunch with a couple of the guys at Pixar the day that Good Dinosaur, I think it was, got kind of put on hold, and they decided to revamp it from the ground up after, I think, like 3 or 4 years of production. It's just like one of those heartbreaking things where if you're investing so much time into something and no one gets to see like what you've been kind of bleeding for this entire time. But yeah, I mean, I'm just curious about that too. I mean, for you, are there projects like that obviously you work on for a long time and they have like a massive shift? Like, how do you typically deal with, let's say, either because I think we all have this at least a little bit, is either like burnout or just kind of keeping the morale up either around you or with everyone on your team? Because I know it's going to be tricky at times when you're doing crazy hours or working on projects for a large duration. And obviously animated features have a very long turnaround compared to, smaller projects. So how do you typically kind of stay on point and stay motivated?
Well, there's the personal level, and then there's the work within the team. But the truth of the matter is that a movie doesn't only involve everybody who's an employee. It also involves everybody you never see, who are the spouses, the children, the family, everybody revolving around the employees. And you really need to have a really good network, a support system, a balanced life on the side, and people who are understanding that sometimes, yes, you have to give in, do extra hours and things like that, because it's just a matter of, preserving one's health and mental health too. So it's unfortunately, it's like, you don't know how much is going to be expected out of you from the get-go. And sometimes you're right, there's going to be some massive changes where you've been investing so much into one direction, and then all of a sudden, because of changes, whether it's in the screenwriting or other kind of decisions are made, and a lot of gets shelved or completely changed. So it's like you have to be able to have that resilience and bounce back, and it's a lot easier if you have a support system, if you have, whether it's your family, your friends, everybody who are around you and are there for you too in that regard.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just curious, like, again, for everyone who, let's say, is aspiring to break into the industry, because obviously when we're both going to be at the IMEG Masterclass in Paris, like, there's a lot of students who are always wanting to eagerly break into the industry. And I think you mentioned earlier with remote work that it can be a very competitive industry when you have, especially the whole world open up rather than LA, Vancouver, New York, for instance, or London as well. So for a lot of students who are breaking into the industry, like, how do you advise them to maybe be able to stand out from the crowd when they're submitting their work, when they're building their connections and things like that?
I think my advice, I don't know, there's so many specialties involved and jobs involved
Right.
around movie making, but regarding visual development or stories, storyboard artists, regarding these early creative biz dev work, I think, obviously you need to go to a good school or to have a really good, strong mentors, because actually now it's another option is to learn through the internet, take as many classes online and things. And that's absolutely, there's not a hard way of not succeeding. It's mostly going to be a lot of sweat and hard work to build a strong portfolio or a strong reel. But after that, you need to also build a strong network of connections, and oftentimes having your teachers who are mentoring you, if they can give you some advice on who to reach out to or who to try to connect to, that's already a very good start. But also in the animation industry, if you're interested in studios that are located in Los Angeles, for instance, coming to conventions. Lately, for the last several years, we have Tina Price, who started CTN, and a Creative Talent Network, and that's once a year, I think around either October or November. And it's absolutely paramount. If you want to go there, you want to show your stuff, you want to meet people there, because that's a huge platform to not only meet studios, but oftentimes to recruit or be recruited at. And that's also an advice that I often give people who want to start off in the industry. And then, of course, having a presence online and show your work online, it's always vital, because that's where people turn to nowadays, just to find people's portfolio.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's really great and so crucial. Yeah, I think most people kind of overlook networking, for instance, thinking that's more for people in suits with cocktails asking, like, what do you do for a living, not realizing that the only thing probably more important than your portfolio is going to be the relationships that you build over your career.
Absolutely. I mean, once you start working in the industry, it's even more important to extend your network and get to know people, and also, I mean, it's of course it goes with your work ethic. It's like once again it's a team work, so it's important to be able to work well along with other people, and a lot of people are capable of doing that, but some artists are much better, do better just working by themselves and don't want to have those human interactions, and maybe animation is not the thing for them. It's unfortunate, because some people are really talented, but not everybody is capable of adapting to a team, and unfortunately, that's really necessary for animation.
No, that's great. That's really good advice. And I guess like the final question I would have is just, in your experience, like what do you think are some of the more common mistakes that artists make when they first start, or maybe when they're first going to job interviews and things like that? And I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot with that one, but
Okay, I don't know if it's a mistake. I mean, I know when people are just starting that there's just so much anxiety and nervousness that, of course, it's really hard to be happy with one's performance when you're doing your first job interview, for instance. But, it's like it's important to be honest and to present yourself as you are and to, express your interest for the position or for the studio, of course. But I feel as though having had a chance to review a lot of young portfolios of artists, either at school or coming out of school, very often there's this kind of, you see that there's been exercises at school that are done and that are shown in portfolio. And so there's a lot of variety of things. And big studios oftentimes want to know what the artist really wants to do because they want to specialize them. And that I think is probably more true for big studios than smaller studios, but big studios will say, well, would you rather do layout or color or character design or story? Because I see everything in your portfolio. So there's oftentimes that kind of question coming from the studios. And the fact that the artist, the student has shown a whole wide variety is not against him, but because there's not more of an emphasis in one field more than the other, then the studio is not going to make that decision for the artist. So it's like either the studio is going to be confused about what the artist is seeking, or the artist is just going to need to refine and tailor his portfolio to exactly what the position is. So that's a little tricky sometimes because you can see the potential of the artist. And as an artist, as a student, you really want to show everything you can do, because you never know. Maybe that piece, if you don't leave it in your portfolio, maybe that's the piece that could have gotten you the job. So there's always that self-doubt. But for portfolios, less is more. You want to show fewer pieces, but your strongest pieces, as opposed to everything you can do in too many pieces. So I think for smaller studios, I'm guessing that they welcome more the idea that you can do many different things. But I don't know for sure because I haven't worked in small studios. It's just something that I heard. But for large studio, I know that oftentimes they much rather have you specialize on like a layout portfolio or a color portfolio or a character design portfolio, just to make clear what it is that you're looking for. Now, also regarding portfolios, I often advise students to try to bring something that's more than into the portfolio, because you can tell oftentimes when they're just regular exercise, but if you're showing an environment, you kind of want to understand how that environment fits in a bigger project, on a theme, on a story. Maybe it's a story that the student has made up or something, just to have a chance to show that you can bring a lot more creativity than just doing an exercise. I'm sorry for the...
No, that's fine.
Yeah, so it's like anything that you can bring in more ideas, more creativity. If it's going to be character designing, exploring these characters one against another, doing contrast of characters, for example. If it's going to be locations, placing some characters in the location, even if it's not what you're looking for to sell yourself as a character designer, just placing some characters to show scale, to show a movie moment, to show a feeling or something like that makes your portfolio so much stronger, for instance. So there's different ways of selling yourself by already thinking, what is it that I'm doing? What's the final product? What is the studio looking for? And a good reference point are oftentimes those art of books that come out after the movie is made, and you look at that artwork, and it really gives students kind of a clear idea of what the level of artwork and the quality and also the appearance that they like and they really respond to. So it's always a good example to look at.
I love it. And what are you talking about in Paris?
I still have to talk with
Patrice?
yes, with Patrice about it because there were a couple of options and I don't think we narrowed them down yet.
Hmm. No, I was just curious. I mean, I feel like that event's one of the few that you actually get a lot more get a lot more leeway in terms of he's just completely trusting and like whatever you want to talk about, go for it. So I think a lot of us, Parkinson's law, we kind of leave it to the last minute, and when we're flying over there, it's like, all right, like time to build my slides. No, I'm really curious to see how your
Well,
talk turns out.
one of the things that I'm thinking of, maybe the topic I will talk is the colors, symbolism, and how color is used to create a color script, basically in animation, how we can best utilize colors for storytelling, because it's kind of an area that's really I find pretty rich and fascinating. So I think I'd love to share some ideas about it.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing because, again, I think it's one of those things that you're either exposed to very early into, learning art. Otherwise, if you're not, then, it's just one of these things you realize there's a whole language there in terms of color theory and how that can completely change everything. So, yeah, I think that'd be amazing to sit in on.
Yes, and it's even more fascinating with because, as you're saying, it is a language, and we come from different countries in the world, and we speak different language. We think color very differently, just like we think languages differently. So it's interesting to see that some colors are positive in some countries and negative in other countries, and it's just a lot to juggle with when you want to, you know, decide on your colors of your main character or a really important moment or create your whole color script around a strong idea. So it's like it's multifaceted. It's a really complex area, and I find this fascinating.
That's so great. And where can we go to online to find out more about you?
My online website is www.noelle, that's Noelle dash Triaureau, which is T as in Tom, RIAUREAU.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes as well. Again, I just want to thank you for taking time to chat. This has been amazing.
Thank you very much, Allan.
Okay, I want to thank Noëlle for taking the time to chat. I think this was a lot of fun, and I think that she shared so many amazing insights. So, that being said, I'm going to be back next episode with the first ever email teardown. So, I'm going to be going through a lot of job applications anonymously. Obviously, I'm not going to mention people's names, but I'm going to go through a lot of email applications as well as companies who've reached out for outsourcing and to offer their services, to break down what they did right, what they did wrong, and share just a lot of insights. You'd be surprised at some of the emails that I get. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I think I'll be doing a lot of these. I've been teasing this for many years that I'll be doing it, and this is going to be the very first ever email teardown. That's going to come up in next episode. But for now, if you want to read the show notes and everything else, all the resources, everything that we shared in this episode, go to allanmckay.com/175. Finally, if you found this episode valuable, please take a moment to share it around. If you're on your phone, simply take a screenshot and then post it on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you like. Tag me in it so I can see it, and I'll be back next episode. Until then, rock on.